can you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your nonprofit origin story?
So I'm Madeleine Nance, but a lot of people call me Maddie. I, I've been in the nonprofit industry. I thought about this just now. It's been 15 years since
Oh
I've
my goodness.
had my first fundraising job. And this was in Australia. It was for a small animal welfare nonprofit. And it was as a fundraising coordinator. So you know how it is with the small nonprofits. It's everyone's doing everything. So I learned a lot in that role. And then I moved on to some larger charities. I worked for two more after that, one for children and one for youth. And I got some larger organization experience. And then it was when I had my first baby 7 years ago that I went freelance, started my own business as a writer because I love the writing side of
Right.
fundraising. And I made that my niche. So I am a fundraising copywriter, and I've been doing that for 7 years now from America. I now live in America.
I was going to say you're all over the place,
Yes.
clients all over the world, which is very exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And that's the
so,
upside of writing. You can do that for anyone, anywhere.
yeah, and so you still have clients in Australia and in the US now?
Yes. Yep. So I am writing for organizations in Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, the US, possibly, and Canada. Yep.
Nice.
All
That's
over.
amazing. That's amazing. And so, I mean, this wasn't part of the questions, but I'm going to ask anyway. So, what do you see as commonalities between the countries, and any like quirky differences that you see in fundraising copy? Like, how do you straddle all of those different worlds?
Yes, I think about this stuff a lot. So I think overall, fundraising and nonprofits, there's definitely a consistent trend across countries. We're facing similar challenges with the way we do things as an industry and dealing with donors and all that sort of thing. So there's definitely similarities. The differences as a writer that I'm finding is it's the way different cultures communicate. So,
Right.
for example, in Australia, I think Australians are more laid back, more conversational. And I am finding in the US, it's a little more direct,
Okay.
which can actually be great for fundraising because you can
Yeah.
go in with a stronger ask. And I would say Canadians have a similar a way of communicating to Australians and New Zealanders. So I'm seeing that as well. So
Okay.
it's been a cool thing to learn.
Yeah, it is. And there is both a writing and a communication style. And for sure, as a Canadian who has many American friends and has worked with Americans, like it is much more direct in the US.
Yes.
Usually in a positive, like you're noting, in a positive way.
Mhm.
But I mean, Canadians are just a little more subtle, right? And not as quick to like jump in to like the ask as quickly,
Yep.
which comes with benefits in some ways, but also is not as great sometimes for a fundraising ask, or you're trying to do too many things in one email because you're like, oh, well, is this a newsletter update or is it fundraising ask, or like,
Yes.
where is it, right? So
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I totally see that. So I'm glad you agree with me. And I definitely, when I say Americans are more direct, I do mean it in a positive way. And
yeah,
my husband's American, and obviously I live in America, and I love everyone here. And it's even in my personal life, I've been learning the different ways to communicate. And I mean, this is going down whole other tangent. But
yeah.
even in America, the difference is I've lived in New York before, and now I live in the South, North Carolina. People communicate differently.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I love that you've got like this global view on
Yes,
fundraising. So
it makes me hyper aware of people.
yeah, yeah, no, and I think and you bring that into your writing, like for sure. Like it's the
Mhm,
influences and the stories and the people that really kind of bring out our writing. So,
mhm.
favorite piece of working in the nonprofit space, like what just like absolutely gets you jazzed about nonprofit work?
Okay, so my favorite piece that I write, I would say, so I love writing for the nonprofit sector. I love it because of the emotion.
Yeah,
I I cry so much when I'm writing because I feel the story that I'm writing about, and the amount of times my husband walks into my office and he's like, "What's wrong?" because I'm just
Aw.
streaming the tears. But I love that about my writing, is being able to just really experience something that I don't know. I don't know anything close to that in my real life. In
Yeah.
my life, I don't know challenges like that. So I love the emotion of it. But what I was going to say is, my favorite piece I'm going to choose is actually one of my more uplifting things that I do. It's for a nice change of pace, and it's writing newsletter stories. So
Oh,
the one in particular, I write for an organization in Australia who work with Aboriginal communities. And so these Aboriginal owned businesses, they write and they give updates on the businesses they're running in their communities and all the success
right.
they're having. And it's just so cool to write about. I just feel like I'm there and I'm excited with them. So
Yeah.
I love those really happy, upbeat stories as well. So it is a nice change of pace to crying my eyes out.
Well, and I think like you noted, for nonprofit work, social impact work can really give those who are outside of the work an opportunity to connect with other things that are going on in the world that matter, right? And you can have, you know, it's okay to have a job that's, the way we all need to make money and all of those things. But I think there's a deep desire in people to feel connected to the world at large. And if you aren't working in social impact, you still want those
Yes,
feelings, right? You still
yes,
want that like goodwill of going, holy crap, I'm like changing lives today. And so I
yes.
think that is a really cool way. And writing, video, all of those different things kind of come
Mhm.
together to create those emotions.
I think people love storytelling. People love stories. They want to hear them. And I do think people seek that emotional connection.
Yeah.
So being able to create that for someone is, if I'm feeling it while I'm writing it, I'd hope that translates to them reading it.
It sure does. Okay, so your experience in nonprofit industry and now as a consultant, what are you seeing as currently one of the biggest challenges for nonprofit?
So sometimes I think about this because there's always this people saying, oh, charities, nonprofits, they should act more like businesses. They should really look to the corporate sector to learn how to operate. And I've been thinking about, well, I write mostly for nonprofits, and what makes that different? What is my challenge? And a big thing is not having a tangible product that you're selling. So it's not like a mobile phone company or a moisturizer. It's not a transactional thing of, you give me your money as the customer and I give you this product that you can physically hold in your hand. So working in the nonprofit sector as fundraisers, we have to sell something it's an idea, really. It's an
Yeah.
idea that you are helping someone who you can't have right in front of you. You might never meet them, but you have to convince or move someone's heart to want to be part of something that they can't physically be part of. And so that's a huge challenge for our sectors. How do you do that? And that's a big part of my fundraising writing, is finding the right words to say to show people why they're needed and what their donations mean when they can't physically be there and see it.
Yeah, because I mean, so many organizations, I look at like so many cool organizations that offer child sponsorship. The chances you're going to connect or ever meet that
Mm.
child that you've sponsored are probably pretty low. Although, I guess with today's technology, you may actually have an opportunity to talk to them one day,
Mhm.
right? Or something like
Yep.
that, which is something that, World Vision 30 years ago would have never been able to do something like that. So that would be pretty incredible. But I think, we all like to like hold something on our hands a little bit and go,
Yes.
well, this is what I got out of this. And
Yeah.
that's a lot harder.
It's
Yeah.
also, you just made me think of this as well. It's when you can hold something in your hands and it's something you've bought, there's a direct benefit to you. You're like, this
Yeah.
is the product I bought and I'm going to use it and get these benefits. Whereas again, when we, as charities, when somebody donates to our cause, they're not necessarily directly benefiting from it. They're doing it to benefit somebody else.
Yeah.
And that in itself is a huge challenge to get basically get someone to put their heart into a cause.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it requires a different continuous input than a transactional item, right?
Yes,
Where you're like, I put this in like finances or whatever, and now I have X.
yes,
Whereas I think, donating to a charity or, it's a constant input on both ends, right? Like, and I
yep,
think nonprofits often it can get easy to forget that and like that set it and forget it mentality of
yes.
I
And
don't know how yeah, just
even something you said a bit earlier, even though I said that it's not necessarily that the donor is getting a direct benefit. In a way, they do. I think about when I donate to a cause, how good I feel, and I know you mentioned that earlier that you feel so good when you support something. So you are actually giving someone a benefit directly to them, and that's to feel good.
yeah, yeah. It is a feel good feeling, right? And it's that constant like nudge, little poke. And I was gonna say, like, I know so many nonprofits that are terrified to check in with their monthly donors, right? Like, well,
Yes.
email them again. What
Mhm.
if they cancel because now they're been reminded that they have this $25 donation coming out each month. And I'm like,
Yes,
I actually think you're missing out on an enormous opportunity that
definitely.
those people might be more interested in donating more, but
Yes.
they require care and in further input, right? And
Yes.
but that's an opportunity, not something to be scared of, I guess.
Yep. And an example, I've experienced exactly what you're saying. So, for one of the large nonprofits I worked for in Australia, we were investing a lot of money into our regular giving program. And so we had a lot of donors. And one of my jobs was to put together a donor journey. So, have regular communications, checking in with them and showing donors what they were doing and telling this one story and unfolding it with each communication. And I got the most beautiful responses. Like
Yeah,
people were replying, being like, "Oh, that's so sweet. Oh, how nice. Thank you so much for the email." And it was like almost like I was becoming friends with the donors. It was like a personal connection thing. And so it was
yeah,
quite the opposite. I mean, yes, some people will cancel when they're reminded of a donation, but it's so small compared to the people who are actually, it makes them feel good about their support and closer, more connected to the cause.
yeah.
So you
No,
actually, those people are probably going to support you longer than they would have if you hadn't given them regular updates.
absolutely, absolutely. Okay, I love this so much. How do you think, you know, connection and peer support has had a positive impact on your work in this sector?
Okay, so thinking about the things that sometimes you have those moments in the nonprofit sector where you're like, this only happens in this industry. this, real. I think of an example of my first fundraising job for a small animal welfare charity, and I was the one opening all the envelopes with the donation forms and the checks from all the donors. And I remember one of them I opened up and it just had this big writing over it, "Do not spend this on cats." And it was just like one of those things where it was, I don't know, it was just hilarious.
Oh my goodness.
But what helped was having people next to me in the same boat, to be like, what do I do with this? And to be able to have a laugh about something strange happening that only happens in the fundraising world, and then figure it out together. Like, okay, what are we going to do about this? How do we not spend this on cats?
How do we not spend this on cats? How do we potentially reassure this person we won't spend it on cats? Because
Yes.
they're very adamant on it. And I think that is very true. And there's, in nonprofits, there's so many angles. Like if you are a one person shop, you have a very different set of stories probably than a larger, than a Red Cross is going to have. But there
Yes.
are some similarities across the sector,
Yes.
regardless of your position that, I think it's almost like a trial by fire. If you're in this industry for any length of time, you are going to have had some
Yep.
quirky some quirky stories or even just gotten an intense conversation over the weekend with another friend who's in nonprofit and another friend who is not. And we were talking about trust and, you know, bad player nonprofits that have ruined reputations for other nonprofits. And as my friend and I are trying to stay calm and not like lose our minds about overhead conversations with this
Yeah.
other person, right? We're both just like, but her and I, it was like we were one brain about the topic, right?
Yes.
Because we both just know exactly what the story is. Whereas here's this other person who doesn't have exposure to it. And so as it's like they're having a whole new world open to them because they just don't have the exposure. And in the same way, you know, my friend works at an airline and I have no idea about airline stories. I'm
Yep.
positive if you work in airlines, you got your own stories. But I think that peer conversation in nonprofit, it's really critical.
Yes.
Really.
And even, you know, coming back to across different countries, like working with nonprofits in, you know, New Zealand, Australia, the US, Canada, Asia, they have their differences, but we all experience a similar something, the uniqueness of the nonprofit sector.
Absolutely.
It happens, you know, the demanding donors, the
Yeah.
people, or, you know, having, like you were saying, trying to convince people outside the sector why we need to spend money to make money, those sorts of things, that we're all dealing with that across different countries. But that's the kind of, it's like a thread connecting us all in the nonprofit sector.
Yeah. Yeah. There is a thread. And I think so often because the majority of nonprofits are small shops that aren't attending conferences, that aren't getting out there all that much doing networking, it can feel very much like, well, no one gets it. But there's tons of people who get it. You just have to go and like find your people, right? And
Yes.
have these conversations.
Yep. Yeah. And it's so refreshing when you do meet someone else who gets it. And it doesn't even have to be the same sort of cause. You can have someone from an animal charity talking to someone from a hospital foundation, and you can come up with the same sorts of experiences that you're dealing with. And it's just like, yes, they get it.
Yes, they get it, right? For sure. And so you've been a Hive member for a while now. You've written for us, which we talked about earlier, and just absolutely loved your article. What have you gotten out of being a member of the Nonprofit Hive so far?
So joining the Nonprofit Hive it's been so good for me, especially because I moved from the other side of the world. So back in Australia, I had been in the sector for, you know, about a decade. And so I knew it's a small world. I knew just about everyone. I know just about everyone. I know the organizations. Been to all the conferences. Then all of a sudden, about a year ago, moving to the US with my family, I suddenly feel like the new kid on the block all over again. I didn't know anyone in this sector. I'm getting to know the organizations. And so when I joined the Nonprofit Hive, I felt like it was instant community, like instant friends.
That's awesome.
And even having I love the one-on-one. I think that's the best way to get to know someone, is to have a one-on-one chat. So every person I've spoken to on a Hive chat, I have just connected with instantly, and we've kept in touch. I love everyone I've met.
Yay. Well, I'm very, very thankful for you because, again, one of those easy people to be like, oh, Maddie signed up. Well, I can put her with anyone. It's gonna go well, right? And you know, I think it's very cool your range of experience in-house and now in consulting. And I think storytelling is something that a lot of nonprofits really struggle with. So I know what you're bringing to the conversations has a lot of value to people.
Oh, thank you.
This is awesome. Well, thank you so much. How do people get in touch with you, learn more about your work?
So I run a business called Kind Word, and it's writing and editing. And I also do fundraising copywriting workshops where I'm training nonprofit teams on how to write better fundraising communications. So my website is kindwordreview.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn, Madeleine Nance. I'm very active on LinkedIn.
I was going to say, people have to follow you on LinkedIn. It's fantastic. Your LinkedIn is fantastic with lots of like little tidbits, things to pull out. So
thank you.
Highly recommend you follow. Okay. Thank you so much for your time today, Maddie. Really appreciate you. And this was really fun.
Thanks, Tasha.
Okay, cheers.